Welcome, everyone, to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and on this podcast, I take a deep dive into the writing process behind some of the world's best songwriters. By way of background, I am a former English professor. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So this is a conversation about writing between two writers. My goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers, just as writers, plain and simple. So that's all we focus on. I don't care about tour stories, favorite bands, how bands get their name, favorite foods, anything like that. This is, again, a deep dive into the songwriting process with some of the world's best songwriters. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, it is Lzzy Hale of Halestorm. Halestorm's latest album out now is called Everest. And before we talk about that episode, I'm going to give a shameless plug here because we mentioned this a couple times in the podcast, so you have some context. And also a shameless plug. Last year, I published Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari. That is me. Mark is a good friend, and he is one of the guitarists and songwriters in Lamb of God. And this was his memoir. We published it last year on Hachette Books. It is called Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari. Check it out. I'm biased. It's a damn good book. Mark is a good friend. And this is our story, or his story, I should say. I say that because Lzzy sang on Mark's latest solo album. So there's that connection too. Now, on to the episode. I can't imagine a world in which Lzzy Hale is not writing or thinking about writing. This was a whirlwind of creativity, and I loved hearing all of the ideas she has about writing. She's writing all the time, or she's thinking about writing all of the time. She keeps three, I say, journals with her at all times. She has her 5-year diary, her free write journal, and her pocket field note journal for when the mood strikes. She calls herself a serial eavesdropper, always listening to conversations for lyrical ideas. She finds a lot of ideas. Now, she doesn't do this in she doesn't eavesdrop in public restrooms, but she said she gets a lot of ideas when she's in the bathroom, and she's not the first songwriter to tell me that. But again, if she's not writing, she is thinking about writing. There's always stuff going on. And I love that. And I wrote this quote down. She said, "Everyone has songs under their bed that suck." And we really hit on that. And that is the idea that you can't be afraid to write the bad stuff. Don't wait till the mood strikes. Don't wait until everything is perfect. You got to write the bad stuff to get to the good stuff. And we talked about that at length today. And if you're going to be a writer or a songwriter, you got to push through. And you can't be afraid to write some really bad stuff before you get to the good stuff. She's a voracious reader. We talked a lot about that. But the enthusiasm for writing and for reading, I just loved listening to it. And she has so many ideas, as you'll hear the enthusiasm about her ritual and about the importance of writing every day, as you can tell. So I enjoyed this conversation a lot. I hope you enjoy it too. Here it is, my interview with Lzzy Hale of Halestorm. Are you an everyday writer or a write when the mood strikes type of writer?
What happens when the mood strikes every day? Uh, um, I'm a write everyday person because I end up using it as a tool to kind of to kind of realign the kind of messy puzzle pieces in my head. And really, I like to start my day with it. So the thing about word vomit and poetry is that usually lends itself into a song, and that's become a very important part of my process as well, is getting out the mess first, and then you go back in with a critical brain and kind of put some stuff together, or you have a melody rolling around in your head and you have to get it down.
So is there ever journal writing involved, or when we talk mess, is it only songwriting?
No, I've multiple different outlets. I have a 5-year diary, which is just kind of quips and everything for like getting getting down what I actually did today and try to remember it in the next couple years. I have a free write journal where I'm just kind of, again, word vomiting. And then I have a journal that I carry, a kind of pocket field note journal that I carry with me everywhere for just you know, working through ideas, and whenever the lightning strikes, you're there because I still like the visceral pen to paper method. I do type, and I put stuff into notes. I have a lot of folders, full of all different categories of things. But there's something about when you're really digging into an idea and coming up with it. There's something about that pen to paper aspect of it that, I really enjoy, like just the physical aspect of it. So, yeah, there's that, and then, from all of these things, I end up, kind of piecing them together, into a song, and sometimes the song comes out on its own, especially if I'm here at my house. If we spend enough time at home, I'll be doing laundry or something and then have to stop everything I'm doing and sit down at the piano, you know, because I have this like melody line in my head and I need to figure out where it goes. So, yeah.
Okay, so I have so many follow-ups. I was trying to write down all of your journal
Sorry.
notes on my piece of paper. So, okay, so the field notes, that's what you're carrying with you at all times, is that
Yeah.
right? Okay. So do you, um so are you ever writing with journals and thinking, for the deliberate idea that this isn't gonna be in a song? I mean, I just need to, because some songwriters tell me that those things are entirely separate.
The only thing that might be completely separate that I probably wouldn't use for a song is my 5-year diary. Basically, do you know what these are? So like it's basically like 5 spaces on each page. And so it's like I can see what happened last year, the year before on the same day. And it only gives you like a paragraph to write through. So a lot of that is more factual, like we were in Minnesota today and we had a good time, and there was a puppy. I don't know, those kind of things. But everything else, I definitely dig into. I try to keep it semi-organized. I say semi because, I have the best intentions of, I do date everything, and especially if I have a notion like, oh man, I was going through something, like a year and a half ago. Where is that one? It's like, let me go back and look because sometimes you can find gems in there when you're stuck or so yeah, I don't really leave anything out of the mix, I think, when it comes to songwriting because, you can write a song about anything, I think.
So how far do those go back? Songwriters tell me they keep journals that they keep those for 20 years, and sometimes they'll go back and look for song ideas. Do you do that?
I still have, a box full of multiple notebooks and many I have diaries from the point that I was probably around 9, but, like, actual, like, song journals and poetry and putting that together, that started around 12, 13. So, shortly before we started the band, it was like I was, I don't know, having an awakening at that point and being like, "Oh, this is something that I do now," and then my brother and I started the band because he had an outlet, is him playing drums, and I'm like, wow, I can just write my silly songs to like us doing this and maybe we're a band. We had a very Pinky in the Brain type of arrangement when we were that age. It's like, what do you want to do tonight, Lzzy? I'm like, we're gonna take over the world. I don't know how we're gonna do it, but we're gonna do it. And and it's funny because like my mom found a bunch of those as of recently it's like age 13 through 17 of like more that I had done that had just been in storage. And it's so incredible to like look back and see your 16-year-old self dialogue, after so much time. But it was kind of cool because I was like, oh, that's pretty good. I don't know. I was like kind of proud of myself. I'm like, oh, I didn't hate that, or cringe at it too hard.
Let me ask you a couple of very specific questions. I could devote an entire website strictly to the brand of pen and the color of ink and even the type of paper the songwriters use. It
Oh
is
my gosh.
unbelievable the
Okay.
specificity. Go ahead.
So my two fountain pens. One is a Monte Grappa that I had ended up having just, you can custom make them on the site. That was like my first one. And then I have a Smithson. And I have various other kind of like random ones. Like I'll buy pens on the road from like a local art shop. Like there, I got this one. I should have been prepared and had a bunch of them out with me, but they're still kind of packed because I still have not unpacked yet from tour. Um, but I have this pen that it's a wooden pen, and like of the each of the sides is a little bit of a different thickness, and there's a little bit of turquoise in it. And it was a local artist that was just, yeah, I think it was in Pensacola, Florida or whatever. It was like this local artist in this tiny little shop that had a bunch of like, oh, there's somebody that does crochet and and he ended up selling it to me and it was like $50 or something. But I was just like, oh, this is really cool that you're here. Like I'm getting this from you. And so sometimes you get a little mojo in that. Now at paper, I'm a little less specific because it's just anything that's kind of on hand. I am notorious for stealing all of the notepads in the hotel rooms because I kind of like the idea of having something beside the bed as well. I forgot that's another notepad I have. Which that's the fun one because if you write something at 3 in the morning, you can't always read what it says, and so you have to almost like decipher your own code. That's always frustrating.
So color of ink, does that matter?
Um, I usually prefer black. I had a like crimson, like a blood red for a while, but because the ink gets a little messy on my hands, it's easier to do black. Because if I do red, people just think I'm like cutting myself or bruising all the time, you know. But so the black, it gets a little inky, but uh, it washes off eventually. But if you know this, if you write with actual like ink and pen, it's like it gets on things. Yeah.
I'm left-handed, so it's the
Yeah.
worst thing because it's all over. Yeah. So again, it's unbelievable the specificity that some people have with that, like the brand of, pen, color of ink. My fear, though, is that if I make the process too precious, it puts more pressure on me to
Pressure on it.
write.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think that for me, making it feel special helps in an opposite way. Whereas it's like you're investing in yourself. It's like you're telling yourself that I'm good at what I do and therefore it deserves something nice. If I'm going to be writing, a song or a novel or I'm sitting down, it's like I might as well be using some things that make me feel good or make me feel special. And I wasn't always like that. I think in earlier years, I kind of scoffed at it a little bit. It's like this is something in the past maybe 5 or 6 years that I've really gotten into as far as like, oh, I should get myself a nice pen. I do that all the time. And the crazy thing about the flex tip and everything with the fountain pens is that as you are expressing yourself, like depending on whether you're like in a pissed mood or maybe you're a little lackadaisical, your handwriting changes, and I don't know that there's something interesting about that I know that I'll kind of like look back on certain notes and be like, that was a hard day.
Well, also, I agree with you 100%. And I think also if you go back and you look at those journal entries from years ago, it's easier to put yourself in that emotional state if you can recognize, oh, I was pissed off when I was writing
Yeah,
about this. I agree
absolutely.
100%. And you lose that when you type.
Yeah, and and your handwriting is its own art form as well. It all kind of ends up helping each other. I'm relaunching a capsule wardrobe clothing line in the fall, and I've decided to print some of my poetry and scribble on some of the shirts and like in linings of jackets and all of that because it's something that even if it's the second draft of something, it's not even the finished product. That in itself is art. Your handwriting is art. So yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating to me. So everything kind of helps itself.
So the other question I have, and again, you'd be surprised the answers I get. Uh, when you cross something out, is it a simple line or are you furiously scribbling through it?
I think it depends. It's not just a line. I feel like I wanna, like and I've learned to accept that as well. Something that I started doing with a lot of my kind of draft scribble paper is put it onto some kind of multimedia art piece or whatever, and so that you kind of see it. But mistakes and all. I don't like completely scribbling it out because sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm like, "Oh, that's dumb," and then I'll have a little conversation with, like, the kiddo in my brain, like the kindergartner that's inside of me and like, "But it was funny." Like, "You know what? You're right. That actually probably is the best way. Maybe I'm overthinking it." So I don't like erasing it completely, but I do get frustrated about it. It's like it's one of those I can kind of like, just like, I don't know, double, triple scratch kinda thing. That's interesting. I
Well,
love
for
that
me,
question because I've never actually thought about that before, like, that's, like, something that everybody has a different thing, "Oh, I'm just gonna put it nice."
you have no idea the responses I get. I mean, it's people have very specific ways. I subscribe to when you take those standardized tests in school and they tell you the ones that you know are wrong, cross it out so you never even look at it. I am much
Yeah.
more of the furiously scribble so that
Yeah.
it's not even in my
It's not
consciousness
even
at
in the
all.
consciousness, yeah.
Um, okay, so I'm going to read you a quote. I've got some quotes from writers up here, and you reminded me of this when you talked about folding laundry. So Agatha Christie said, "The best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes." So here's why. And we talked about Mark Morton. Mark told me he gets a lot of great ideas when he's gardening, and
Mm,
there's a lot. It's why we get our best ideas in the shower, and researchers have found that when your brains are engaged in an unconscious activity, that's when the conscious ideas bubble up. So I've heard things like folding laundry,
that's
doing the
amazing.
dishes, mowing the lawn, vacuuming, gardening, anything that requires no thought.
Yeah.
That's when the ideas bubble up. So I'd love to get your take on that. How often
The
that
the
happens with you?
the mundane, with us, like, it's usually the turnaround from tour. So I'm doing laundry or I'm putting things away, so I'm going through the house and putting things away, and I know where they go, so it's just kind of this, like, thing I gotta get through, but it's so funny because it's like it ignites my ADHD because then it's like you're in the middle of doing something or putting it away, and you have, like, the cabinets open or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, oh, that's really good. Wait, hold on. I gotta sit down. I gotta write this down. I'm gonna sit down with either the guitar or the piano and do it." And then you leave everything halfway done. you know, all of a sudden, like my partner's like, he'll come down and be like, "What happened?" It's like you almost got it done. I'm like, "I know. I just had an idea." He understands now, but it's one of those things that it's like, it's frustrating because you have to take the call. You have to, or you're just gonna be sitting there because have you ever tried to ignore it? It's like, it's probably dumb anyway. I won't go and I won't do it. And it just stays there tapping on your shoulder until you're too annoyed to ignore it?
I think I find just that whole idea fascinating. When the eureka moments happen, because they do. I mean, they don't sit down when I'm never going to think to myself, "Let me have a eureka moment." I'm going to sit
Yeah, I'm
here.
gonna
It's
sit.
right, and but it always happens when you're doing things that require no thought and that kind of monotony. I may have heard chopping vegetables, things like
Yeah.
that. Again, but the danger to that to me is that the second you start doing those things and recognizing that's when the ideas come, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, right? I don't know. I try not to think about it too much because I think that I can think myself in or out of things. And if I don't equate it to a specific thing because it's not like I do laundry in order to write a song,
Right.
and I try to keep that in mind because and the mood can strike you wherever. There's many times where we'll be walking, in a strange city, either around the country or in Europe, and then I'll or oh my gosh, okay, here's another place where inspiration strikes. Actually, public restrooms like airport restrooms or anywhere where there's like usually people are just kind of coming in and out there, and so I'm the crazy person that's humming into like your voice memos like hey, here's like the chorus of the song. That's where like the melody lines come most times. It's like that's the weirdest place, and then you just feel like a crazy person, like somebody's in the stall next to you and you're just like singing.
So it happens what because I've heard people tell me that they get ideas in restaurants and they have to go to the bathroom to
Yeah.
put this
And
right.
that's happened too, but it's like sometimes I'm not really thinking about I'm not, like, after it, and I'll be just like, "Oh, I have to pee or something," and I'll go in and, like, whatever, and then I will have the idea and literally have to just, like, hide in the stall until I'm done, and then kind of, like, I don't know. It's interesting because I always think about people that don't understand what we do. What could that possibly sound like? It's like you're da 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 da. Okay, and this is the next part because I usually talk to myself when I'm in my voice memos. So I'm like, all right, this is the chorus, but this also could be like the post bridge or whatever. And it's like, but maybe that's switched around, and so it just sounds like I'm literally just kind of talking to myself and humming to myself. Which I have no qualms with it anymore. If people want to think I'm crazy, it's fine.
Okay, so you did mention voice memos, and I imagine you have just thousands of those on your phone like any songwriter.
Yeah.
Is there any organization to those whatsoever?
I title them even if they don't necessarily have a specific title, I title them based on mood, so that I can kind of go back and do that, and then I will end up just because for safety, because I don't trust the voice memos sometimes, I'll end up, emailing specific ones that I know I wanna work on next to myself and then put them in a folder. It's like it's so dumb, but it's like just the quickest way without having to like think about a whole lot, and do it. I know I could probably put them all in a file and all of this, and I probably will get to that point at some point, where I'm just there's a better way to do the things I do, but that's kind of where it lies. I have an old school tape recorder, and I also like just a handheld that I haven't used it in a while because it's like you end up running out of tapes, and then like really you're just kind of listen back to here. But sometimes it's interesting to and I have one that's actually plugged in that you can plug it in digitally as well and kind of download it. But it's interesting having something that's off the iPhone. Oh, I also have you heard of FreeWrite? It's a typewriter that you can end up sending things digitally, but it's not connected to the internet. Like it's not connected to any like you can't get on Facebook directly from it or
Yeah.
Instagram. You can get on the internet from it just in order to send it. But I got myself one of those as well because there's something about when it's in your phone, you get all of a sudden I'm just like, "Oh yeah, I was doing this." And then I'm like, "How did I end up on Instagram?" You know? It's like it's kind of a time suck and I've been trying hard not to do that over the past like couple years. It's been like just kind of better for myself not to, especially, considering if I wanna keep going in the prolific way that I feel like I'm rolling in now, it's worth it. So sometimes those outlets are more comfortable for me, and I'll kind of go through phases with those. But obviously, we all have a phone in our pocket, and it is the most convenient way to do things.
What about the role of motion? Whether I think you did mention walking. I get a lot of ideas when I
Mm,
hike. But it does have to be, for me at least, the ideas happen when I'm walking in a familiar place again, because I think
mm.
it's easy if I'm in an unfamiliar place driving, or you've got to practically be aware of your surroundings. But there are places that, if I'm walking around the neighborhood that I've done before, the ideas flood. So how often does that happen? Driving, walking, anything like that?
That happens quite often walking. With the driving sometimes, but I feel like I don't always. The last time I wrote a complete song on a bus was in January, and I was like, that was kind of an interesting thing. For some reason, the bus, just because there's like too many people around and there's no real privacy. It's like, and I don't really care about that, but I feel like that kind of scares the muse away sometimes. Not that I'm not open to it. Hello. I spend most of my time there. But even here's the benefit of rolling with a posse, right? So like as a band, and especially me and my guitar player Joe and then Josh, our bass player, mainly because my brother's like Houdini. My brother's our drummer, and
Yeah.
he'll be there and they'll be like, "Oh, shiny things," and he'll go off running. But the three of us kind of usually go in a group, even on off days, like on tour, and kind of walk walk around, even if it's a strange town. So sometimes, and this is to my own detriment, sometimes I'll just kind of be on autopilot and be just like, I don't care where we're going. They're going to somewhere and I'm just going to follow along. And then that's when, I end up having to like record something or stop somewhere or just get out the notepad or whatever. I'm also a serial eavesdropper. Like if we're walking on down a street and we stop at a stop sign and like everyone's kind of waiting to go across the street. I don't know why, but like I've gotten a lot of really great lines from that. It's like whereas like somebody will just say something and it's like, he just said that. Like people are fascinating. People are hilariously fascinating, especially at like the bar too. If like you're eavesdropping dropping across the bar, like somebody's having a conversation, and especially if it's a heated one, and there's always something that you're like, I would never say that, but that's hilarious. That's a good concept. But
I had John Oates on from Hall& and Oates, and he told me he got a song idea once in the Denver airport listening to a woman, talking, having a heated conversation at a restaurant.
wow,
And, I had on Britt Daniel from Spoon a couple years ago, and he said he sits at a bar with his laptop and he listens for lines, and when
and that
they
is
and
awesome. Going fishing.
yeah. Right, exactly. So are you mixing and matching? So maybe taking a melody from the voice memos and looking at something that you've written. How often does that happen where you're saying, "Oh, that will work with this," and kind of it's like a puzzle, mixing and matching those things?
I say um, there's a lot of times that I'm doing that, whereas, okay, here's a melody line. Do I have something for it? And sometimes it's just kind of the work. Like for me, it's like I think if something is special and that I'll end up ruining it by trying to shoehorn something in, I'll just kind of be constantly going back to the drawing board. So for instance, like right now I have a song that I started on my piano out, in our main room area, and I'll leave wherever I left off just up there, and then I'll kind of go by as I go out throughout the day and like just kind of make myself sit down and be like, "Okay, where did I leave off? Let me try something new," just to give the song its own entity, and have it not be so stagnant. Now, that being said, we've had like amazing success with the mixing and matching and puzzle pieces because there are some times that you've been working on a specific feeling for a while. So there'll be like four different songs that are all kind of talking about the same thing because you're trying to work something out. So when you start recognizing the patterns of that, sometimes you can get some like interesting moments in a song because you weren't thinking about it literal uh, uh, I can't think of the word. Um, in a straight line, like when you're just trying to like, okay, have this all in house be just one song. So it depends on what gets you excited, I think. I think that if things get stagnant or if I all of a sudden get kind of bored with the idea, I'll put it away, come back later kind of thing because it's important for me to like be there when it's happening and when I'm going through it and when it's kind of flowing. I'll also sit up in bed and finish things too and do critical brain. But that's always a balance too. And I guess you'll probably ask me about this in a little bit, but there is a yin and a yang to the way that I feel like it's the best way to do that, where it's like, okay, are you messy kindergartner or are you like critical teacher? Which one are you? And can you be both at the same time or can you take turns and play nice?
Can you do you need distance to be able to write about something? Some people say, we writers, not just songwriter, writers in general, will say that you need, and when something happens, you need distance to be able to write about it. Or other people say immediacy. So, Hemingway famously said he could never write about Paris when he was in Paris. He needed that distance. So, what's your
Oh,
take
gotcha.
on that?
Um, Personally, I like the immediacy of it. But in order to like, but again, like I said, I think that when I get to a point where I've exhausted the pile, I've put all the puzzle pieces out on the carpet, then that's for me, that's the time to walk away. But like when I'm going through something, something that I've found has been very important for me and my mental health as well, is that even if it's not becoming a Halestorm song or it's becoming whatever, I'm writing to like kind of work through it. So for me, the immediacy helps because you get it out and it's almost like you've confessed your sins to someone and you don't necessarily have to talk to anybody about it. It's all under the guise that it's something else. And so you kind of find it's like you're almost like preserving the moment in its purest form. And then sometimes it'll mean something different to you down the line. There are certain songs that like I know I was writing this because of something I was going through with my family, but then for some reason it turned into, something that ended up helping me through some type of imposter syndrome. It's like, there's different views, in different spots in your life, I think.
So, can you write at emotional extremes, whether it's euphoria or sadness, or do you find that those extremes make it difficult to write and you need to be more in the middle? I guess another way to ask that is, at which emotional state are you most effective?
Um, that's interesting because I feel like I get a lot out when I'm in a heightened emotional state. Whether or not everything is keepable, that's a different story. For me, having the time to vent, but then having the time to kind of comb over it later, I think is helpful. That at least that's how I think I do that the majority of the way.
One songwriter told me once, I'm going to read this quote. His name is Christian Lee Hudson. He said, "My biggest hurdle as a writer is trying to hack my brain to become less critical." And I think that's the problem
Yeah.
with all writers is getting the hell out of your way when you're writing. So is that a problem? I know that's a problem with me sometimes, but is that a
But
problem with
yeah.
you?
Yeah, you can't, this is a terrible way to put it, but you can't, abort the thing before it's even born. I've learned to kind of separate these kind of 2 personalities, whereas I go into every session no matter what, whether it's a co-write with somebody else and they will tell you this too because I become kind of a 5-year-old. It's a lot of I think it's a lot of fun, but I love writing with other people because you get to kind of like collaborate. But whether I'm writing with myself or with somebody else, I like to approach it in this kind of childlike way, whereas, like, even the dumbest ideas are everything is valid. There is nothing dumb here, no stone left unturned, because I feel like if I am automatically going in and after I write a verse, like, "Oh, is that right?" It's like you don't even know what the thing is about yet. It's like you're shooting yourself in the foot, and then you're going to get frustrated. And I use the analogy. Like I think I mentioned this before. I used this analogy before, where it's like you have this kindergartner in you that just wants to finger paint and make a mess on the carpet or whatever, and you have the teacher that's supposed to be there for guidance and like, oh, you can make that more purple and oh no, the carpet's messy. And it's like they're both going to be frustrated if they're working together. So for me, what was very helpful was kind of separating those two things and being like, I'm going in here with let's have fun at all costs. Let's dare to go there, dare to suck as well. Like write something bad. You might, of course, but if you go in there thinking that or afraid of writing something bad, you're not going to get anything done. So
I have a great quote for you. The writer Anthony Doerr, he wrote a book called All the Light We Cannot See. It won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction like 10 years ago. And
oh nice.
I asked him once about writer's block. And he said, I don't believe in writer's block. He said, writer's block is a failure of courage. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to go there. And you have to understand that no matter what any songwriter says in a book like, "Oh, I'm just born magical." I'm like, "No. You have things under your bed that sucked. You had songs that you didn't like. But finish it. Do it anyway." And I think one of my biggest pieces of advice that I end up giving to young kids that are like, "I don't know, I just can't. I can't do it on my own." All of that is that you always have a partner with you. You either have that messy kindergartner that's in you, or you have your old crone that doesn't, give any fucks anymore, or you have your reckless teenager in you. We're not all just this one faceted thing. We're very multifaceted creatures. And so if you need to draw on something, draw on that, lean on yourself, and don't compare it to anybody else, before it's even, like I said, before it's even done. Like, I try not to do that anymore. I used to, everybody does. They're like, oh, well, that was cool. Was it as good as this release? I don't know, but I try to think about it like a desert island, kind of analogy where it's like, if I was the only person here, and there was nobody else to show it to, or to or to compare it to, would I still like it? And that's kind of the idea for the end goal. But you have to get through all that messy stuff. One of my favorites, I believe it was Songwriters on Songwriting by Paul Zolo. Whatever the one with Tom Petty in it. They were talking to Tom Petty, and he was like, "Dude, I think it was American Girl." He was like, "I had American Girl for like 3 months. All I had was this ding and ding and ding and ding and ding. Ding. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew I liked it, but I didn't know what I was doing. But I had to keep going in and trying stuff, and like and then one day, oh, eureka, there it is.
I'm writing an essay right now, and I'm struggling with that because I have this idea that I think what it's supposed to look like, and then I have to remind myself that as a writer, the biggest mistake I can make, or I think a writer can make, is knowing. Like, I don't think I have any right knowing what something is supposed to look like when I started.
Right?
The biggest mistake I can make, and like Mark and I, when we wrote the book, what that book ended up looking like looked nothing like it did at the beginning. Nothing. I mean, even the whole format is different. But I think the biggest mistake I can make is to say, I'm here, I want to get there, and here's how I get there. And
Yeah.
that is paralyzing if you think that way.
I absolutely agree. It's like, who am I to know? And who am I to even like it at this stage? It's like, why do
Yeah.
you have to like adore everything? It's like it's like I think we put too much pressure on ourselves, and tell ourselves that we should know what we're doing, and we should be these geniuses, and we should like, I should have the answers, but we don't. And that's kind of part of why we're in it, I think, is because we're seekers. We're not, and discoverers. We're not the be all end all higher power that runs this whole show. It's like whatever you call that thing, or, some people call it the muse or whatever it is. But, music does have a sense of magic to it, because if there was a rule book, there's this the illusion of rules in the music business. It's like, oh, if you do this, you'll have a hit. If there was a rule book, we'd all be doing it the same way. It'd be math, you know? But the fact that there's so many variables and so many different ways to do things, and different ways to express yourself, and different people with different tastes and different moods, it's like that's what it is. So again, who are we to say that we know anything?
I'm going to read you my favorite quote. This is the favorite quote that songwriters love. It's from the novelist E.L. Doctorow, and it's exactly what we've been talking about. So I'll repeat this because it's so good. He said, "Writing is like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as the headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way."
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, I don't need to read it twice. It was so good. But right, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Is you can see in front of you, but you can't. It's okay if you can't
Yeah,
see to the destination.
absolutely. It's just the headlights. That's really cool. That's powerful.
Yeah. All right, last question. I always like to talk books, poetry with songwriters. You write poetry, so I love to tell you differently, but the number of songwriters who tell me they read poetry, I could probably count on one hand.
Yeah, I honestly, I need to read more of it. You know what I usually actually end up reading, is, other songwriters who do poetry, like the Bob Dylan book or something like that. But honestly, I read books, like actual books, like and in different, and they kind of go all over the place. Like, I just finished reading fantasy novel by Joe Abercrombie called The Devils, and then I'm also reading Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola, Estes, and they're two totally different things because that's a hard read. The Women Who Run with the Wolves, but I find myself. Oh, and then I'm reading a book called Alien Clay as well, which I actually forget the the author for that. But I like reading books because it takes me out of my own head, but it's also something that I know is like feeding me things, unconsciously, and you just get a different dialogue and a different vocabulary. But yeah, I don't read many poetry books. I have gotten I have poetry books that have been given to me because I write poetry, and I'll run with it for like like a period of time. Like I'll get like, oh, this is so cool. Oh, that's really great. Like uh like the Nick Cave book is amazing as well. It's like I think I'm more attracted to that, like people who have done it that have been kind of like musician first, even though it's a part of my process. I never let myself call myself a poet. I always called them skeleton songs, because it was just kind of like the bare makeup of something that would eventually become a song. But but yeah, that's really funny. It actually makes me feel better to know that more people don't do that because I'm like I should be doing that. I'm putting some stuff out. But
Are you a genre person or an author person or neither?
the only time I ever get obsessed with an author is that if I've read like more than, 2 books that I'm like that I know that they're amazing. That's actually for me and Joe Abercrombie because his storytelling is amazing and it's funny and it's humorous and it's like sometimes it's historical fiction, sometimes you don't even know what planet you're on. So I've read a couple of his books, his series. But really I go by depending on my mood, usually not necessarily title, but kind of subject matter, I like a lot of dystopian stuff for some reason. I don't know why, it relaxes me. You know? Anything the world's already ended or going to end, I think that's why I like horror films too. I'm sure my therapist has an explanation for this. But, but yeah, I don't know. It's like I go through phases, of things, and I'll get obsessed with a book and then I'll pass them on. But I don't have a whole lot of like, I'm gonna go back to them again and again and again.
But it sounds like you're reading more than one book. You're reading 2 or 3 books at a time too, right?
Yeah, I don't know why I do that either. I think it's because I think I get not bored, but I like to pause,
Oh,
on a
absolutely.
feeling. And sometimes it depends on the day where it's like, you know what, I'm not really in the mood for that. I'm going this way. And um, I wonder when that's gonna bite me in the butt, like when I'm older, and all of a sudden I get confused. I'm like, was that the last chapter of this book or the chapter of that book? You know, hopefully it just keeps my brain cooking.
No,
I
I
wanna
do the
more
same thing, but they have to be different types of books, like it's fiction,
yeah.
nonfiction, yeah. Because I feel like unconsciously the book I'm not reading is doing something in the back of my brain and I'm processing it.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And that's a really good point, keeping them out of the same genres. There was a point in time where on tour that Joe and Josh and I started like just kind of for the tour like a book club and and we all wanted to start this one book, but I had to finish this other one in order to get into that book because it was too similar. I'm like, dude, if I start this now, I'm just not going to think this one ever ended. So I got to figure that out. So yeah, it's a yin and a yang.
So I used to be the type of person that I had to finish a book no matter how much I hated it. Once I stopped doing that, it liberated me. So do you need to finish a
I
book or can you put it down?
I used to be that way. I used to be the idea that I could put it down, but now it's like, look, I'm halfway through and it still isn't like something that I want to pick up, I don't want to waste my time.
You
you
don't
know,
even bother. You just
no,
say,
I leave it, and then it's funny because like there have been some things that I'll come back to later and be like, let me try it again, maybe whatever. But then by that time, if it's been too long, I'll have to start all over again. And so it's like, yeah, it's a tough decision because I'm also the kind of person that likes to finish my plate when I have a meal. That's just how I was raised. So it's taken me a long time to be like okay with not having to finish something that I'm not interested in.
I listen, there's a very clear through line to me, the songwriters who read and who are good songwriters. I just don't, I don't interview many songwriters. If you read interviews with classic songwriters, None of them have ever said, I don't read, it's a waste of my time. I mean, they're all
Yeah.
voracious readers. Like, it's very clear. And I tell songwriters, it's like, you want to be a better writer, just make sure that you're reading. I don't care what kind of
Yeah.
writer you are, you've got to read.
You're expanding your vocabulary and you're hearing stories in a different told in a different way. And it's a really easy way to get better as a songwriter because it's not like it doesn't feel like you're doing any work, you know? It almost feels like a waste of time, like a pastime. And I tell myself that too. I'm just like, man, I just sat here for like, 45 minutes just reading. I probably should have been doing something else. I'm like, no, that was good for me, you know?
I'm so glad you said that because I do have to remind myself of that. It's when I sit down and I read, because I do make sure I read every day, I have to remind myself that, yeah, what I did just made me a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you reiterating that because now the next time I think I feel a little guilty for taking some time down to read, I'm gonna be like, "Nope, I'm a better person now."
So, are you a morning person, night person? Is there a favorite room? Things you have to have with you? Like, how important is that?
Um, I think it's changed over the years, whereas it used to be a night person, whereas I would kind of like, you know, hold up, but then that ends up like going into the wee hours. And I think it depends on when I the mood strikes me because I will still do that. Um, but I try to give myself a little bit of time every single day, kind of more in the morning, like before the world kind of gets to you, to kind of get my thoughts together and like, okay, who am I today? And what what am I gonna do about it? You know, it's like, is there something here that I can kind of grab onto? And then throughout the day, kind of like keep going back to it and being like, oh, that's interesting. Or maybe I'm thinking about the concept I had yesterday, and trying to finish that up. I live a very fast paced life. So it's like we're on the road a lot. So it just depends, I think, on when I can kind of sit down. I have my pads and my papers, and I don't always travel with my travel typewriter because that depends on where we're going. It could be a nuisance. Um, but I like to set up shop and just kind of and be neat, just have a spot, especially kind of like wherever we are in the world and in the dressing room and whatever. And I usually find my moments. And then there are some times where I'll just kind of go mobile and I'll just take my stuff outside somewhere and just try to kind of absorb that way and just get something down, see whatever it is. I think that part of the joy of it is the search, like what feels good today. So yeah.
When you are home, though, is there a room or a certain chair? Or does that matter?
Yeah, I have 2, well, technically 3 spots. We actually end up having, we built a studio in our basement, but I also have what I call my lizard lounge that is in my upstairs room. It's basically it used to be like a guest bedroom, but I kind of took it over, and it's part, like, childhood, like, I have a lot of, like, my weird childhood, like, my clothes in there and, like, some things, but there's also, like, just kind of a little vocal chain and a little setup there. And then sometimes I'm down in the main room just at my piano, just depending, like, and I have a guitar kind of hanging up there. So it's like you kind of have these spots that are kind of everywhere and depending on your mood. Like if I want like to really dig into something and I need like absolute quiet, I'll go up to my room. If I'm doing or collaborating with my guys or doing something that we usually do that downstairs. And then everything else is just kind of a free for all.
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. You can find all of the old episodes on all major streaming platforms and probably some minor ones as well. You can also find them on the Songwriters on Process website. I started the site back in 2011, so that means there are hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with some of the world's best songwriters. So take a deep dive into some of those episodes. They are all great. Of course, I'm biased. Also, shameless plug. My book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, is out now on Hachette Books and in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God. And so we collaborated on his memoir. I'm biased, but that's a damn good book. Again, it is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir. And lastly, if you want to get in touch, Go to the Songwriters on Process website. You can fill out a handy contact form, and it'll get to me that way. You can also email me at ben@songwritersonprocess.com. I'm all ears. Send me your comments, your suggestions, your complaints, people you want me to interview. I get great suggestions all the time. I can't respond to all of the emails because I get a lot of them, but I do read all of them. And let me know your thoughts. If you have ideas for people you want me to interview, there's your chance. And with that, I am out. See you next time.